and welcome to Pushing Boundaries, a podcast dedicated to helping you step out of your comfort, take control, and shatter the glass ceiling. The idea behind doing this podcast came from one of my mentees when she said she would love to be a fly on the wall when I am talking to the people that I draw my inspiration from. And that's where we decided we're going to do a podcast and we're going to try and spread the knowledge that I have been lucky enough to acquire from some of the most inspiring leaders that I have worked with. In each episode, we're going to dive into stories, insights, and strategies to encourage any one of you to take charge and challenge your limiting beliefs and fuel your ambition. Whether you're starting your career or raising through the ranks or leading from the top, Pushing Boundaries is for anyone and everyone. We want everyone to take bold steps, make informed decisions, and break free from the self-imposed limits we put on ourselves. Let's break barriers, redefine success, and push boundaries together. And with that said, I'd love to welcome our guest today, Laurie Shakur. Laurie is a powerhouse. She is a dynamic people officer known for her deep expertise in HR and her commitment to doing what's right for the people and the organizations alike. She's currently serving as the Chief People Officer at Session AI and has been an HR leader at some of the biggest names out there, like Rakuten, Gracenote, Mitsubishi Bank, and PG&E. As a leader, Laurie is driven by data, but guided by empathy. She's able to balance metrics with compassion and create scalable frameworks that empower people to lead from the top. She excels at attracting the top talent and builds an exclusive culture that helps everyone bring their best self to work. She brings so much spunk and vibrance in the workplace. I call her the Beyoncé of the corporate world. You can't miss her when she's in the room. She's got that energy, that enthusiasm that brings people together and allows organizations to achieve their goals and hit milestones one after the other. I am so honored and privileged that Laurie has joined me as a guest today. Welcome to the podcast, Laurie.
Oh my goodness, Shuchi, thank you so much. The honor is all mine. I am so thrilled about your podcast. This is such an important thing that you're doing, and thank you.
It's my pleasure, Laurie. I'm glad that we're getting to talk and doing it in a more formal setting, but the idea is to really help spread the knowledge that you have acquired. And through me and through this podcast, I hope to change at least one person's life. We should start by talking a little bit about your professional journey and how it all started. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Thank you for that. So I'm no different than most HR practitioners. I did not, as a child, grow up and say I wanted to be a people leader. I stumbled into it. And I, quite frankly, stumbled into it after approximately 10 years of being in financial services and numbers. And I was a person that prided myself on just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I will never forget, in my early stages of my career, I had an HR manager that said, "You're awful at what you do." I'll never forget it. I was, what? I thought she liked me. And I paused, and she went on to say, "You're good, but your energy really lights up when you do presentations, when you're talking with people." So the reason she said awful, and I understand now as a people leader, she saw something in me that I didn't. She was looking at my talents and my strengths and where I drew my energy from. And so that began my career in HR. I was lucky enough to go through a robust fundamental training program that has allowed me to keep growing continuously. So here I am today, over 30 years of experience. I've worked in every aspect of human resources. And if I were to describe my absolute favorite part, it's this: the development. Each and every one of us is designed to grow. It's just a part of who we are. We want to be better. And so the small part that I can play in helping everyone realize their best self, just like that woman did for me over 30 years ago, I'm down for it.
That's amazing. And it's so inspiring, and it resonates with me so much because somewhere down the line, somebody saw that spark in me, just like somebody saw that in you. And I'm glad they guided you and they guided me, because we are on this path that we enjoy and we feel deeply passionate about it. So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear a personal anecdote from your growing up years or from your life that has stayed with you through life and that has made you who you are today.
Oof. Well, that's a hard one, Shuchi. I'm a native Chicagoan, south side of Chicago. And so if I were to think of growing up, it was the 60s and the 70s. It was quite an interesting time. My father worked for the same company, incoming, 35 years. It's unheard of now. And he worked for that same company in the exact same role, in the exact same capacity. And I share that just to underscore how different things are now. Companies hold themselves accountable to grow and develop, but it was different. It was a different time. But what I remember, despite his level, was how he felt about that job. I had the privilege and honor each Saturday to go with him to pick up his check. Now, there's some people saying, check? What's a check? I know my daughters are like, what? What's a check? But we would go each week to pick up his check, and I would go into the office with him. And while I don't recall exactly what her name was, but I knew she was responsible for everything associated with people and payroll. And everyone loved her. And she created this energy. And she was so kind. As everyone was coming in to get their check, and myself included, she knew something about each and every one of the family members. In the case of John came, he brought his daughter. She was prepared to greet me, often with a little treat or something, just to acknowledge me. I felt so seen. My father felt so seen for 35 years. And while I wouldn't have known, it was only within the last decade or so that I reflected on that. That's what's fueled a lot of my desire for creating environments of inclusion and belonging. My father was the only one. He was the only one. But he was in this ecosystem of allies and people that cared for him, so much so that for 35 years, he felt valued and appreciated. So I now recognize that put an imprint on me to do the same for others, because many are the only. And I want everyone to feel as though they're not alone, because my father didn't. He was in a great environment, and I'd like to foster that same experience.
And you do. I have personal experience, you do. And it's incredible to see that your dad inspired you to sort of be that light that you are today. And thank God for that, because it's people like you that really help the bigger organizations make sure that their people are seen and heard, and that's the place for them, and their voices are being heard. So thank you for doing that. All right. Now that we've learned a little bit about Laurie and understood her journey and her story, I'd love to get to the meat of this actual conversation I wanted to have with Laurie. And that is about pay parity. So Laurie, this is a big topic, and it creates all kinds of feelings in a lot of people out there. But the idea behind doing this podcast is to sort of help women that are in a position where they can negotiate a salary raise for their new job, or for women leaders or leaders alike, to be able to make some changes and do something about it, right? So my first question is, for somebody who's out there negotiating a salary or negotiating a promotion, I mean, you usually don't negotiate a promotion, but let's say you're out there for a promotion, or you're out there negotiating a salary, what are the steps they can take to be able to be better informed about pay parity and do the best that they can for themselves?
Thank you for that. And it is such a relevant topic. And before I delve into my suggestions, I just want to footnote that I'm so grateful that we can even have this topic. When I started my career, it was just common knowledge that I would make a certain amount that would not be equal to my male peers, and my title it was just understood. And I know that sounds barbaric. So I'm really grateful that I can share, that we can talk about how women can empower themselves. So what comes to mind first and foremost is researching market rates. So everyone should know what their value is on the market. And there's a number of ways to do it now. Of course, we've got Glassdoor and PayScale and LinkedIn salary information, which is all self-reported. So there may be a little bit of, a question around total accuracy there, but where you can get your most bang for your buck is looking at roles now because of the pay transparency laws. Organizations have to give ranges for each and every role that they post a job opening. Now, those ranges are typically very broad because they cover a national geographic footprint, but nonetheless, it would give you just a ballpark of knowing where you should be, which again, from when I started my career, I had no idea where the starting point was. So first and foremost, knowing your value and your worth through market research. If you're internal, documenting your achievements. So often, and I can pick on ladies, we feel uncomfortable. I hear words like, I don't want to brag. I call it self-promotion, and it's so critical. We're now our biggest brand. As knowledge workers, we're our biggest brand. And it's so important that we can clearly communicate our value and worth to an organization. And the best way to do that is to have all of your achievements just top of mind, know how much you're worth. And then seeking those transparent conversations. It's uncomfortable for many of us, myself included, to advocate and speak up. But it's so important to, if you don't have that comfort level with your manager, ideally there's an HR person or some other trusted leader that you can talk to, because you want to bring up the fact that you're seeking more and that you want to ensure that you're currently paid fairly. And so that's a very crucial and sensitive conversation. So you want to make sure that you have a safe place where you can have that conversation. Additional to the going out and doing your market research, network. One wonderful thing is we can talk about bands. We can talk about how much we're earning. There's nothing wrong with talking with trusted colleagues in your network to find out about market. And sometimes, and again, I can pick on us ladies because I've lived this, negotiation skills. It is so critical that we know how to negotiate for ourselves. And you don't have to know everything that's on the table. By knowing your worth, by knowing your value, you define what's most important and you begin to leverage some true negotiation. And then lastly, I think I want to underscore, most companies want to do the right thing. Most companies set out to pay people, all employees, equitably. But sometimes due to other rigor and projects and other competing demands, that's not the priority. So there's nothing wrong with asking for a review of your salary. So for example, technologists, the market is constantly changing. We live in Silicon Valley. What was a salary 6 months ago, I guarantee has changed based on the quick turnaround of skills and the appetite for acquiring those certain skills. So it's nothing wrong with an employee asking, has there been a review of my salary? Has there been a review of the team's salary, the organization's salary? Again, it goes back to transparency and recognizing that most companies want to do a good job. So I would say, follow all those steps and give your existing organization, your leader, your HR person, a little grace. Assume good intention, assume positive intent, but have those conversations. Feel comfortable to speak up for yourself and know that you're doing the right thing.
That's amazing. And that's such a great advice, because I remember back in the day, this was the most uncomfortable conversation I could have. And if I could recall that one incident where I was up for promotion and it was taking forever, and I just did not know what was going on because I was getting all the indications that, yes, I'm up for the promotion and it's going to happen, but it was just not happening on paper. And then eventually I realized that you, Laurie, was keeping that because you wanted me to be at par with my colleagues, and I wasn't, because I had started low. And so most companies have a percentage based on which they promote you from one level to the other. And sometimes that percentage isn't good enough. But as you rightly said, ask those right questions, be aware of where the market is, and assume good intentions, because most companies and most people want to pay you your worth. But sometimes circumstances happen and you just aren't paid at par with what your peers are making. And it's always a good idea to ask those questions and be aware. And yeah, again, push yourself, be uncomfortable, ask those questions, know your self-worth, and you'll eventually get what you're worth. So thank you for that piece of advice.
Oh, and if I do remember that, and if I could share, I remember being uncomfortable because I recall you pulling me to the side saying, "What is going on?" And I remember thinking, "Shh, I'm going to get in trouble if I tell you." But I believe strongly that that body of work is the most critical body of work that HR could be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that double click is required. But again, we've got to assume positive intent because sometimes we're moving fast.
Yeah.
And there's a desire to move, but making sure that that movement is the right move for everyone is what's really critical. So moving fast, but then slowing down just enough to make sure from a holistic, equitable perspective, it's the right thing to do. And that was the case with yours. Your number wouldn't have made you at par with your colleagues. And so I kept pushing that boulder uphill until I was heard.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I can say thank you from a lot of women out there that would resonate with this. And I would want to flip the question now and ask you, as a leader, as somebody who's hiring people, when you see something like this within your org, what can you do to make it right?
So again, I always assume positive intent, and most leaders don't walk through the door saying, "Let me see the salaries of all of my team, and I want to make sure that they're equitable." You know, so as a leader, whether new to the organization or established, I say on a regular cadence, and it's really going to depend on the size of the team and the size of the organization and HR support, have a talent salary review. It's ideal if you could do it around the performance management or focal timing, but on an annual basis, because as I mentioned, there's so much movement and shifting that often one may move, another may not. And then now you've got this issue of disparity. And so it's so critical to have a regular cadence where you do a talent and salary review. Additionally, and you know, this really goes back to HR again, but leaders can ask, do a pay audit. So I've had the pleasure of working at really large companies where that was mandatory. You know, on a regular cadence, we had to do pay audits. But now I'm in startup land. There's no requirement, but I implemented that. When I joined the company, looked across the organization and made sure that there was parity. Benchmarking salaries. It's so important to look at job levels and make sure that the company has decided and defined where they want to pay, because there's a broad market and each company has their own framework. It's either 50th, 75th, 100th. Know what that is. And as a leader, understand those benchmarkable salaries. And then also ensure that your performance management system is rock solid, because it's all about paying for performance. So you want to make sure that you reward your people fairly and that you communicate what they're being rewarded for behaviorally. So that's the how, and specific deliverables, which is the what. Once a leader understands the benchmark, the scenario in which they could provide an increase linked back to pay for performance, there's a strong likelihood you won't have a lot of misalignment, but it takes a lot of work. Additionally, having open conversations and discussions. So I am one for being transparent and open. And during the calibration discussions, I often ask about talent, but I've now started having salary discussions, very open, and asking employees, how do you feel? You learn a lot from employees because often we assume it's base pay, but it could be some other benefit or reward or some other sort of recognition. So it's a leader's responsibility to have those open discussions to make sure that they understand what exactly their employees want. But again, it goes back to the bottom line of having fairness. And I think in closing, I would think about, and this is a provocative one, sharing the ranges. So now with the pay transparency laws, a manager can explain, I'm making this up, but this particular software engineer salary range is this. The range starts with, if you're this tenured with this amount of experience, you're in this first quadrant. If you're medium with skills and proficient, you're in this quadrant. If you're highly skilled and an expert, you're in this quadrant. Managers can and should, because of the pay transparency, explain that with the help of HR, where each employee fits within there. Because I guarantee the hungry, humble, and smart employees are going to want to know how they can get to the next one. And on the heels of that, it's clarity and performance and development. So again, it goes back to, it's this wonderful circular place that a leader finds themselves. Understanding the data, knowing their people, making sure their systems, processes, and reviews in place, communicating transparently the desire to pay for performance, and define what that really means. So there's a lot of accountability with leaders and HR to ensure that everyone feels as though they're rewarded equitably.
Right. And I think what you touched upon is such a great point, because once you have that level of transparency, everyone on the team would want to bring their best, as you rightly said, because one, they're clear in their head on what their deliverables are and how can they sort of get to the next bracket by achieving X, Y, and Z, right? So that level of transparency in the big picture helps the organization, because everyone's bringing their best foot forward. Versus what happens sometimes is people are just frustrated because of lack of clear idea on why they're making certain amount, which is lesser than, for example, their peers. It leads to a lot of distrust in the system, in their organization. You see that impacted in the work that they're doing as well. So for the bigger picture and for the bigger good of the organization and for the people, it's always good to have some of these best practices in place. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
That. Great. And so just to sum up and conclude, if you could just at a very high level help me really figure out what are the actionable steps. Let's start with the actionable steps for an employee who's negotiating for a salary or up for a promotion. I would say some of the things you said were: have a brag book, know what your accomplishments are, do the market research, know what your worth is, know what the market is paying, and then just be out there, be uncomfortable and ask those right questions and be aware. Anything else that I missed there?
Nothing that you missed. I think as I heard that, the one thing I would add on is, and we talked about this in one of our other conversations, be uncomfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Everything that we've talked about today, I know takes us out of our comfort zone. I personally had to have those uncomfortable conversations, but know those uncomfortable conversations or those uncomfortable experiences make us grow. So know that you're doing the right thing for yourself. You're doing the right thing for the company. Keep going. Keep going.
Fantastic. Great. And then for leaders out there, some of the things you mentioned were have a sort of salary audit of the team that you're leading, do some sort of benchmarking, and then just try and be more transparent in the brackets and bands that you have with the team, so people are aware of where they fit in and what can they do to achieve or move to the next bracket, right? Anything else there?
I think what I would add there is it's so important for leaders to have those ongoing conversations around the value that the employees play in the organization. It doesn't matter the number, it's what people feel. So yes, leaders should fight for the best number, but in addition to that, make sure your employees know that they're seen, valued, and heard. Because sometimes there are constraints and you can't pay. None of us are paid our worth. How about that? Maybe Elon Musk, he's a billionaire. The billionaires, they're paid their worth. But humans, normal humans, most of us, we're not paid our worth. We add so much more value. So the true value or the true recognition, appreciation comes from those words from the manager. Saying, while I wish I could pay you more, this is what we can pay you. And this is within our framework that allows me to pay you this. And you've earned it through this performance achievement. So having that clarity around performance and really, really doubling down and making your employees know that they matter. That's the role of the leader.
That's amazing advice. And I truly agree that it's what you make your people feel that makes a big chunk of the overall employee satisfaction too, right? I mean,
Oh, yes.
salary is just one component of it, but as you had told me in one of our other chats, what other things can the team offer? Can they offer them mentorship or training or
Yes.
something else that can show them that they're valued and the company is invested in their growth as much as they are? Goes into long way into making them feel heard and valued and being loyal to the company, so to speak, right? So
Absolutely.
that's amazing. I am so honored that you shared all of this wisdom with us, Laurie. This is incredible, and I hope that I can use some of this when I'm out there. But I also feel like this information can help a lot of women out there who are struggling probably to really put down some structure around what is in their control, what is it that they can do, and yeah, find the best match that they can for the next job that they get and shine out there. So thank you so much for all this wisdom. And I really hope to keep tapping into you to share more because you're like an unbelievable fountain of information and wisdom that is amazing for us to have. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And I'm humbled and honored to be here.
All right. Thank you so much, Laurie. Great talking to you.